Wait. Awesome. How about that?
So, first of all, both teams, we would love to recognize you in front of the board outside, but I also want to say thank you to our parents for supporting what you just saw, what we just had a chance to see. How exciting it is to see individuals having a great time, but as a group. Both of your teams, squads, I don't know what, fantastic. So we would love a chance to honor each and every one of you, but ultimately your collective energy and what we just saw. Thank you for sharing with us. Really appreciate an opportunity not just to celebrate you, but to watch you. So thank you for sharing that with us tonight. Parents, students, if you would join us out at our, I call it our boardroom out here.
Guys, for the demonstration show, it's awesome that we're able to do that. So, football, and we can see the replay of the game for us. It's nice to see what you guys do. You know, the superintendent said it's awesome to see everybody working teams and things together and activities and excelling around. How do you want to move forward? You want to show?
Yeah. A couple of things I want to start. I want to start with Coach Mock, if we could. I'd love the new superintendent. We're going to do this a little different than we did in the past. And so what I'm going to ask tonight is that our coach We'll start with Coach Mock, do a little bit of celebration of the team. And then we're gonna ask that each student of that squad come up to the lectern, tell us who you are, tell us your grade level. If you're a senior, we'd love to have you tell us what you're thinking about for next year. So again, each one of you have a chance to talk a little bit to the board. We also are working on, and I have to tell you, we're working on it because of these two teams, a new, we'll call it our state champion coin. It's a coin each one of you will get from us. It says, honored and recognized by the Board of Education for being a state champion. Unfortunately for us, you won a state championship not that long ago. We're working on it. It's not here yet. So we're hoping to show you a copy of it. And as soon as it's here, we'll make sure you each get a copy of it. Hopefully you hold on to that. We felt like that was a nice way to honor your work. But we also wanted you to be able to look back in 10 years and remember the night you were recognized for what work you put into this, that you were recognized by the leaders in our district. So for that, we're gonna ask that we do a little speech by the coach, and then we will all step out in front of here. Each team member, tell us who you are, what grade you're in. Again, a senior, tell us what you're thinking about for life after Roosevelt. You'll walk through, shake your hands or knuckle bumps, and go back to your seats. Does that sound clear? All right, again, just want to recognize and honor the work that each of you have put into where you are, but collectively is even more impressive. So thank you again for representing this community, this school district, and this school. It's a pleasure to see high-level performers, and we just got to see two groups. So thank you for being here tonight. Coach Mock, would you step up and get us going? We got 30 seconds. I gave you 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds, right. Okay, I'm Coach Mock. I have been coaching this program. This is my 10th year in your anniversary. So great way to cap it off was this amazing team giving me the gift of the state title for my first time in my career, which is pretty amazing. It only took 17 years. But the majority of my career has been with this program. I love this school. I love this community. Don't live here, but you know, logistics. But I couldn't think of a better team and a better group of individuals to have won this state championship with. This group of kids is the most talented, most dedicated, most loving group of kids I've ever had the honor of working with. And it's my pleasure. Stop it. Stop it. Especially that one who cries every day. I just love these kids to death. We had 9 seniors on the mat. And those seniors were the backbone of this team at state. We had rough weeks going into state. The night before, they had an amazing, incredible practice. And we did all right in prelims. We're okay. Went into the finals. And second, I just asked them, what are you gonna do different? If you wanna win, what are you gonna do different? Man, they did it different. And they went out and hit a routine that I couldn't have asked them to do. They're amazing.
All right, here's the rest. I'm going first.
Start right here.
Front row.
Front row. You gotta go first. Yeah.
Okay,
Guys, they're all going.
Yeah, my name's Gordon Gary. I'm a senior, and next year I plan on attending the U of A or Midland to study biology.
Right there. We do have it on the screen now. That's what the challenge was.
My name is Haley Sanchez, I'm a senior, and I plan on attending college, hopefully cheering. I'm Addie Wilson and I'm a senior and I graduate esthetician school this week and then I'm gonna move and just work. I'm Jayla Boris and I'm a I'm Kevin. I'm a Kenzie coach. I'm also a junior. I gave it to Aaron. I'm actually Cordova and after high school, I'm a senior and after high school, I plan on going to coach to be an extra coach.
You're the one up on the top, right?
Yeah. My name's Justin Aaron and I'm a sophomore. I'm Katie Humphrey and I'm a sophomore. My voice is Clark and I'm a junior. I'm Felicia Carol and I'm a junior. I'm Jaren Klein and I'm a sophomore. I'm reading for your.
I'm Tony Seaberg, and I'm a junior.
You adult sophomore?
I'm Makai Sade and I'm a junior. Thank you.
I was.
Uh-oh. My name is Carter Holland, I'm a junior.
My fellow Americans. My name's Kennedy, I'm a senior and I like to work at Home Depot.
I'm Raquel Ziegler. I am a senior and I plan on going to Montana State University for pre-nursing with my best friend. Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm a senior and I plan on going to Montana State with my best friend. My name is Trump McCarthy. Games great purposes for dental health. I'm rolling over and I'm a sophomore and allow him to go.
So just real quick, Noah and I were discussing after this, we're gonna go back. Him and I are gonna go on separate periods. Where they're gonna toss us both.
No problem. I got you. You've been working. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Thank you all for sharing, at least where you are. Some of you where you're headed. Coach, I just want to say, well, I didn't give you a whole lot of time to prep. And you said you don't live here, but you live here. And so I just want to say, we appreciate all the time and energy you put in with these young ladies and young men. And we look forward to years and years to come. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Coach Reddy. That sounds weird to say, because the girl just called me Coach, but Coach Reddy. I started with this program when I was 19 years old as their choreographer. So here we are 7 years later, and to see where this program has grown is incredible. You guys are my heart and soul, and you know that, so much so that my fiance and I just bought a house in Johnstown. Both on the Wednesday after we come back from nationals, so I can't settle down. But you girls, you know how I feel. This season wasn't one of our easiest, which was why the win felt so amazing, because you earned it, you worked for it, and you showed everyone what Johnstown Roosevelt is about. So I could not be more proud of you. The repeat feels real good. So let's keep it going.
I'm Madeline Santoni and I'm a junior.
Madeline.
Emily and Leslie.
My name is Kathy Holmgren. I'm a senior. I plan on attending Colorado Basic University and studying nursing.
I'm Audrey and I'm a junior. I'm Madison Chiggett. I'm a senior. I plan on attending Arizona State University and majoring in psychology. I'm doing mayor, that's all. I'm Addison Abel. I'm a sophomore. I'm Abby. I'm a sophomore. Yeah.
Everybody? All right. Coach Reddy, you got a bunch back.
Yeah.
Well, again, tonight, as we think about celebrating both state champions, for me as your new superintendent, it's my first two. Pretty exciting. Look forward to years to come for many of you. And for those of you leaving Roosevelt, best of luck as you look to pursue whatever adventure you talked about tonight or whatever adventure comes next. Parents, thank you for supporting this. Having students that get involved, that belong, that are part of a team, that carries forward in life. The lessons you learn doing this kind of work is something that helps you the rest of your life. So thank you for, I know there's hours that are going into back and forth and transporting and sitting and watching them compete. So thank you for that. and committed to our school and to Roosevelt and the community. Let's give parents a round of applause. What would you like to say?
Little cheer mom, so I'm really excited to see the program succeed. It's been a lot of hard work from the cheer coaches. I've maintained connections with them, so I'm really excited to see this job really take it from here. For a long time, but come so close. So it's really exciting to see you guys push it over the line, and I was watching the finals from home, and it's really exciting, so congratulations.
I just want to say that was unbelievable, just unbelievable. When I went to high school, cheerleading was so different than it is today. And the amount of athleticism and practice. I was talking to one of your moms, and 4 to 5 hours a day in prep for finals. Is that right? About what it was. And that's unbelievable on top of all of your homework and keeping up on your studies. So I'm just blown away. You could do it again and I would just be as captivated because I wanted to watch each and every individual because everyone plays such an integral part in the entire team. It was so good, so good.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. Thanks for coming out, both showing off your routines, but also sharing your names and your experience with us. I look forward to watching the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you got one? Okay.
That's all I have for
Any other celebrations?
Yeah, you see my keys?
Let's go and we'll do, reports and comments from board.
Oh, sorry.
He's over there.
Yep, board reports.
I'll start it quick. Hasn't been a ton going on this last couple weeks, but we did several of the city council meeting, work session, where they talked about our cash removal with Green. Very green. I think it's a good thing. A lot of questions. I think it'll be on board of the meetings to be approved. That means to me. There you go, perfect.
Words as approved.
Now it's kind of through, really will approve soon, it sounds like, which means. We're almost there, actually.
Yeah, and really, the mayor who really, wasn't coming to
Yes.
us. How important it is to support that.
I just want to congratulate Superintendent Nelson on his first official snow day call or weather day call. That's always such a hard decision. As a parent, I appreciate the amount of level of education. I thought it went really smoothly. So those are always hard calls. That was a really cool.
I really don't have that much either. Tomorrow, we have a BOCES meeting tomorrow. I did send you guys out an email today, with the handful of bills that didn't use the legislature. That Academy Legislative Review Committee is keeping an eye on and looking for any feedback if you have any. So, yeah, peruse those, and if there's any concerns that you have or represented to that one of the group. So, that's all I have. Let's move on to the Brooklyn superintendent.
I don't have a lot, same thing as, what many of you said, kind of slow a couple weeks. I had on mine talked about Greeley. Tammy and I spent a couple of hours over at Civica, to end last week, just in and out of classrooms and, enjoyed our time over there. We spent some time out at PRE today, in and out of classrooms. We had negotiations, one of the evenings last week, working mostly on, elementary plan time. Yes, board member Johnson talked about my first snow day, and, as a Minnesota guy, snow days, cold, are hard, and just for the board to know, as I think about, snow days and days off, I often think about food insecurity, so that's at the top of my mind, is, particularly coming out of a weekend where, families or anybody that has some food insecurity have gone through Saturday, Sunday, Monday already. So it's hard to move like that. And yet I think it was the right decision yesterday, as it was real cold. It was cold for a Minnesota. And now we've got that day out of the way. That's always, I don't know how other superintendents, but for me, the first one was, kind of nerve wracking. But I want to thank the team, and I know, Tammy's not here, but she's a trooper. Tammy and Jessica, worked real hard to make those things smooth. And so Tammy's working to write communications nonstop for a couple of days. But I also want to thank transportation. You know, you go through, and I think people don't often realize how hard transportation is, particularly when it's really cold. We literally had 5 buses yesterday completely froze up. And when JJ called us, he was tore up about it, but can't do anything, right? When your fuel's frozen, you're not going anywhere. So they worked on it late last night. They worked on it this morning. We ended up with 3 that didn't work, and by this afternoon, all of our buses were up and running. And so that's a testament to that team and JJ's leadership. They also were willing today to go out and help in situations where people didn't know what to do. But I also want to say thank you to the community, because the transportation, we had a lot more people step up and drop their kids off today. And that's what you need. We didn't have a lot of people who were overly frustrated. It was a problem to solve, and people did that day. So as your new superintendent, impressed with how everybody wraps their arms together and makes it happen. So, for my first snow day, I really felt like, well, snow day yesterday, but even today, coming back to the school, things worked out about as well as we could have expected. Many of you were able to attend the bean signing over at Roosevelt Middle. And then we had several students that went down to the stock show today. So that's kind of an exciting field trip for a group of students from Roosevelt. So, President Mills, that concludes my updates.
Okay, any questions?
I did want to make one piggyback off the community, like I saw several faces of kids asking for it, their parents asking for it. It was really neat to see that. That happened this year, that happened in the past, and it's sort of going back.
Any other questions? All right, then we'll move on to the district financial audit review and report from the CFO's office. I feel like we should have that guy who stands in the boxing ring that says, Let's do Mr. Everett.
It absolutely is. Thank you, President Wales, members of the Board of Education, and Superintendent Nielsen. Tonight, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Melissa Bigler. She is a shareholder with the Anderson and Whitney accounting firm, and she is the lead shareholder for her district's audit. And she would like to present the audit to the board.
Thank you. It's funny you should say that about the whole, like, let's get ready to rumble, because as I heard we were gonna go watch this fancy thing in there, I'm like, oh my gosh, last year the board meeting did something amazing too, and then I get to follow it with financials, which, I mean, it's exciting to me, but maybe not to everybody. My friend was like, you can leave those on the table, it'll be fine. I'm like, really? I can know the audit was limited. If I had done some cheerleader, I think I could do that. One for you guys. Trying to keep it going, but I didn't.
Maybe I'm spirit finger.
So, thanks for having me tonight. I'll talk briefly on some pieces on the audit. There's two things in front of you, the audit itself, and then the other thing is a letter, and this is the management letter. And what this is a quick communication from us to the board that touches on some different audit processes, and what we do during the audit process. Last year, we had an additional communication that was brought out at the beginning of the engagement, so it was part of the engagement letter to the board that talks in more detail about the audit process. And that's a planning type of communication. Some of the things that are included in this repeat that, but it's more just to get multiple touches out to the board during the year. So if we had specific comments or recommendations for the district, that would be included in this letter. We didn't have anything writing to the letter that felt like it needed to be included here. It felt like the audit went really well, which is a testament to Michael and his team, because this year we had 3 major programs for single audit. Generally in school districts, you'll see 1, maybe 2, but with the ESSER funds being considered high risk, it has to be audited as major. And now that a couple of years have gone past with the child nutrition cluster and idea not being audited as major, they needed to be this year. So hopefully next year we'll get into it where they'll just 1 again. So time will tell. But I thought what I would do, and the audit document itself is like 80 pages, so don't worry, we're not gonna go through all of it. And I would say probably half of it is para and OPEB footnotes. So if you take those pieces out, really it's not a ton, but it is a lot of work getting this all pulled together with all of the different funds. Let's pop first to pages 1, 2, and 3. These are our audit reports. It starts with the audit opinion, and we do believe that these financial statements reflect the financial position of the district as of June 30, 2023. Because we don't do the audit for Civica, it has an extra paragraph in there explaining that we are referencing to the Civica audit, but we did not actually perform that audit. So that's why there's an extra paragraph there for that. The next couple of pages talk about management's responsibility and the auditor's responsibility. And I feel like it's really important to point out here, management is responsible for the financial statements and the footnotes themselves. We help to draft the financial statements as a non-attest service, but we don't have responsibility for them. Our responsibility is then to audit the financial statements and footnotes. So if there wasn't somebody like Michael who could read the entire thing, I'm sure he has most of it memorized. But like the paranoid footnotes, I mean that.
I skip that.
Well, yeah, high level. If there wasn't somebody that could take responsibility for that, then we would have an independence type of issue. So that's a very important and key fundamental piece of the audit process. The next few pages after that are the government-wide, or the management discussion and analysis. It touches on some financial highlights, government-wide financials. It's that 5-page synopsis. If you want to just quick high level, what's going on in the district, you can grab that link. Pages 10 and 11, these are the statements of net position. So the first column is going to be the district, and then your component units are KQA and Civica, so they each have their own columns. Now, these numbers from their columns are being generated from their separately issued financial statements. So that's where these numbers are coming from. A couple of things to call out. You can see on capital assets, about the middle of page 10, netting about 185.2 million. Those deferred outflows of resources, the biggest piece of that are related to pension and OPEB. There's also deferred inflows of pension and OPEB over on the other side, as well as the actual liability for each of those.
Well, Carol has,
See the long-term debt at 146.2 million. It's pretty nicely amortized. If we switch over to page 14, these are your governmental fund balance sheets. And these are probably what you're more used to seeing as a financial statement presentation throughout the year. This is a current measurement focus. So this isn't getting in long-term focus items like your capital assets and your debt and pension type of things. So these will have all your assets, liabilities, overall fund balance of 65 million. Page 16 is your income statement. Total revenue of all of the funds together, 77.5 million. Total expenditures of 141.3 million. Keeping in mind that column there for the building fund, a big piece of that is spending down in bond funds. So you expect, as that's happening, we're going to be a big negative in there. So revenue over expenditures was 167 million. The first few pages of footnotes are policy-related footnotes, but let's hop over to page 27 for the changes in capital assets. And this is where you can see the activity going on here. So we started the year with a net of about 103 million. And then there were 83.7 million of additions, some additional depreciation expense, and then ending with a net of 185.2. The bottom part here where it talks about depreciation expense allocation, we touched a little bit on the statement of net position that has the long-term measurement focus. There's also the statement of activities, which is the long-term measurement focus of an income statement as well. And this is how those depreciation expenses are being allocated among that statement. So some key financial data then from the charter schools is included on page 9, KQA and Civica, that has their capital asset activity. And then page 29, is your debt. So the amount due within 1 year is the 5.1 million. That includes your bonds, best money, lease obligations, and a little bit left for bonds. What part after that? Start the para and OPEB footnotes, but let's skip ahead to take a peek at page 62. This is the general fund budget to actual. So the left-hand side of the page is comparing the revenue, and then the expenses start on the next page. You can see overall total revenue was budgeted about 48.4 million. Total revenue brought in was 48.6 million. A big thing to point out here, if you look towards the middle of the page, is that state on behalf payment. This is related to para, and we find out when we get the schedule of employers allocation, whether or not the state is going to be participating that year. When preparing the financial statements, it would be helpful if they would consistently either help or not help. I mean, it's a very bigger, broader issue than that. But what happens is, in this case, there's been a couple of years in a row where they have kicked in their on behalf payment. So that means that there's a revenue and then there's gonna be a corresponding expense. But when they don't, because they're not kicking in money, it changes your proportionate share. Which is why if you were to compare these financials, like statements of net position and those deferred inflows and outflows, and they have really big swings, part of it is the change in proportionate share. Because what might have been 0.2% for the district is maybe then like 0.15, which you wouldn't think is a big deal until you do the math, and you're like, wait, what? That's huge. So if you don't do, so what happens is Paris says, let's amortize this over 3.4 years, or they give you what they want you to amortize it over. If you don't do that, then what happens is it hits pension expense all in 1 year. So it's good to do that, to level out some of those highs and those lows. Another thing to point out though about para is this is based on 12/31/22 actuarial data, which means that once we get around to next year, it'll be based on 12/31/23, and 12/31/23 from an investment perspective is better than 12/31/22. So hopefully next year, some of these things will level themselves out a little better. But this is an election year, so then we go forward a year, and then you see what I mean? So sometimes what some school districts are doing are starting to budget for a state on behalf payment. It's just an additional revenue and an additional expense, but what it does is it helps not to go over expenditures if something like that were to pop up. Because like in this case, the district share was 1.2 million, which is a pretty big, I mean, it's great on the revenue side, but on the expense side, so following pages after that, this is just getting into the budget actual section. So this has each of the funds included here. When we were initially looking at the balance sheet, on page 70 and 71, this has what rolls up into those other non-major governmental funds. So that's made of two funds, the food service fund and the people activity fund. So this is just a combining schedule to show what's included in that, since on the balance sheet it just has a high level view. Page 74 and 75, this is your schedule of expenditures for federal awards. So this year there was just about 3.9 million expended. Page 76, towards the middle of the page, this shows the ESSER nutrition cluster and special education, the IDEA cluster being audited as major this year. There's also a couple of additional reports here in the back for our single audit testing. The first one is each major program in accordance with uniform guidance. That's a separate report. And then the other one is governmental auditing standards. And something to point out on that one is it does do a call out for KQA and Civica. They're audited under general auditing standards, but not governmental auditing standards. That's just the very last page is the piece that pulls all of this together, which is probably Michael's favorite part.
Hands down.
What happens is we go through all of this work, and we pull together this draft, and then he starts uploading and comparing it to the audit, and there's usually like a few different tweaks that need to happen to get things to be jumping just right. And especially with, this also includes the charter schools, so especially with the charter schools, and with some of them, like the building fund, there's a building fund at KQA and with the district, so some of these are combining in different ways, and that sort of thing. So it's definitely a feat to get it through. So I think we signed a couple drafts back and forth, but it has that pretty little final. Let's get right down there. I see it as bold. It might just look normal to you, but it kind of stands out. So those are the things that I wanted to touch on. I do want to reiterate how helpful Michael and his team are during the audit process, because I know we ask a lot of questions, and when you have 3 major programs, you ask even more questions. And then we get kind of close to the end, and then I keep reviewing work papers and additional questions. And he might not smile every time he gets an email, but it feels like a smile when I'm getting a response to that. So he doesn't let it shine through like again. So I start sending them through some of our other team members, but he shared with me, he knows they're coming to me at that point.
Well, it's like at least we can fill in. Do you have any questions?
Just to make sure I'm reading this correctly, there's no findings in any of the major programs.
Which is pretty huge for a couple of programs that don't get audited super regularly.
And then Michael had mentioned that there are a few little things like going over expenditures and things like that. I didn't notice those in the notes or in the management letter.
So those, for the notes, that's gonna be.
You know, and no one.
Oh, yeah, it's in note 1 in the budget section. It is, let's see, page 23. That 3rd paragraph in the budget section.
For the record, Michael was on page 20.
Oh, wow, it was fast. Oh, you found
That's
it?
the news on page.
I mean, I thought I was gonna say
It was
that.
whispering.
Oh, wow. Maybe
I didn't want to step on your flare.
Well, I even tried to be like, I typed it. But then to see it in the budget to actual, let's pop back to that too, because that's a good question. That is on page 65. So total expenditures were 42.6 million, and the final budget was 42.2 million. Keeping in mind that does have that on behalf payment of 1.2 million.
And then is next year the year that you have to start paying the gap? Did you implement any gaps this year? Your financial plan, the operating lease.
So the leases were implemented last year. Leases 87 was implemented last year.
Then this year.
Mhm. It would be what?
The software one.
Well, that was the subscription-based software. Yes, we looked at that during the audit, and the Infinite Campus one, because it's an annual agreement, it's falling under the short-term piece. The other thing that's nice is it's cancelable. So if it was non-cancelable in a longer term, then it, would have additional layers of excitement.
Any other questions?
So I think a boring audit is a good audit.
Oh, yeah.
Was it the jazz one? But yeah,
No, in all honesty, though, I do want to say, I think it's evident by the joking going between you and Michael that you guys have a really good working relationship. And I think from what we experienced 2 years ago, that's a great thing. And it probably always should be, right? I mean, you probably always should have a good working relationship. I think there's a lot of respect, obviously, between the two. So we appreciate that as a board that it worked for us. So appreciate it.
And President Wheels, I would like to call out, Mrs. Bigler and her team. They are wonderful to work with. They're very responsive.
there's a holdup, it's generally on my end, in the process, so, because I would like to call that out.
Any other? We need to take action on this. What is our suggested action? Are we adopting the audit report?
I move that we approve the audit.
We have a motion by Director Proctor, second by Vice President Sisano to adopt. Is that what you said? Approve. I said adopt. Approve.
It's not a resolution.
The budget audit report as presented. I'll get that. Any discussion? Steve,
Johnson? Yes. Amanda Proctor?
Yes.
Nick Stefano?
Yes.
Amy Musgrave? Yes. Michael Webb?
So thank you guys.
Thank you, Mike. Now we'll move on to our consent agenda. Those following the procedure. The items for approved by the board. With a single motion, most of the items listed under the consent agenda have come to board review recommendation, documentation concerning these. And have been.
Hey, President West, we still need to do the CFO report. Before you move on.
Very well. You know, we will do that.
Yeah.
They were, yeah, okay, I just, I
Michael
saw
was-
supplemental budget.
Michael was smiling in that.
Things like, no, put the brakes on that. Mr. Everest, before yours.
Thank you, President Wales. So tonight I'd like to just do a relatively quick rundown of this kind of the district's financial condition as of December. If we start on page 2 of the presentation, financial statements review. So looking at our general fund, the district received almost 28% of its monthly budgeted revenue in December. Year to date, we are at 20.41% of our revenue. District expended almost 102% of its monthly budget in December. Year to date, we are at 42.25%. Looking at our individual schools, Milliken Elementary expended 102% of its monthly budget. They're at 44.6% year to date. Pioneer Ridge expended 95.71% of its monthly budget. Year to date, 43.25. Elwell, 94.69% of its monthly budget. Year to date, 40.78. Milliken Middle expended 97% of its monthly budget. They're at 41.66% year to date. Roosevelt High School expended 114% of its monthly budget. They're currently sitting at 45.25% year to date. And with Roosevelt, the primary reason for the overages is that in December, there were a lot of purchase service payments. So for we paid our Ames concurrent enrollment bill, we paid our online classes bill in December. So those are both big chunks, and that's primarily the reason why Roosevelt had such they were at 114% of their monthly expenditure budget. And then looking at our universal preschool program, they collected 82.84% of their monthly budgeted revenues and expended 111% of their expenditure budget. Year to date, the program has received 53.57% of their budgeted revenue and expended 49.96% of their budgeted expenditures. Moving on to the next slide, looking overall at the district's departments, they expended 99.35% of their monthly expenditure budget in December. Year to date, our departments spent 39.67% of their expenditure budget. Been looking into our individual funds, insurance reserve fund. In December, they had spent 81.71% of their annual budget. This fund is primarily used to account for district insurance, and the lion's share of the district's insurance is paid in July, so that's why we're have such a high percent spent in this fund. This is normal for this fund to look like this. Looking at our food service fund, with our food service fund, we have collected 222% of our budgeted revenues for the month. We're running at 61.37% of revenue budget year to date. We expended 108.83% of budgeted expenditures for the month. We're sitting at 39.45% year to date. So with the food service fund, and we'll touch on this again in the supplemental budget presentation, with the significant increase in participation in our food service program, that's why these numbers look so skewed. So in the supplemental budget, these numbers are being adjusted based off of the first 5 months with the data that we have on it, and projecting that out for the rest of the year. So that's why these numbers look so skewed. Moving on to the 4th page, our grants fund, year to date, budgeted revenue received is 29%, and our budgeted expenditures are running at 24.85%. Looking at our student activity fund, we collected 122% of monthly revenue budget, and we're running at 64.62% of our revenue budget year to date. We have expended 122% in our monthly expenditure budget, and year to date, we're at 42.26% of the budget. And here again, this with the student activities, you do fundraisers at the beginning of the year, and then towards the end of the year, you spend it out. So you're still seeing that we're collecting, we've collected more than we've spent so far. So at this point in the year, that's kind of what you would expect. Looking at our bond redemption fund, this fund won't see significant revenue collection until March, when we start receiving our local property tax payments. This fund has expended 67.29% of its annual expenditure budget thus far. And then we'll have another round of significant expenditures in June when we have our scheduled interest payments that will be paid out of this fund. And then on the last page, building fund, we received 56.4% of budgeted annual revenue and expended 51.58% of budgeted annual expenditures. Capital Reserve Fund, this one again we'll also kind of touch on in the supplemental budget. I needed to make some significant updates in the supplemental budget, and we'll go into that during that presentation. But so far in December, we've received 119% of budgeted annual revenues, and we've expended 154.25% of annual expenditures. This concludes the CFO report, and I can answer any questions if you have.
Any questions on
Well, it's related but unrelated. So like in the public content, we have the assurances for financial accreditation. This is an annual
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, what that is. Give me a second.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I didn't know that. It's basically just it's kind of a checklist, questionnaire of all of the different things that the district needs to do to be in compliance. So basically, if you answer no to any of those questions, then you need to provide an explanation and how you're going to get to yes next year on that question. So, and the district, we complied with everything this year as we have in the past. So,
does any of this get that financial transparency?
for them
No.
to monitor us?
No, the financial transparency system that CDM has, it's basically, it's just our raw financial data that's input into that, and then they, slice it and dice it in different ways and present it. But none of those specific things make it into.
They use audited data for that.
Yeah, so.
Is that why it lags?
Yes, so what feeds that, the financial transparency page is, it's our, the CD system is called data pipeline. That's what Mrs. Bigler was referring to, that, generates that last page in the audit. I upload, our, raw financial information, to that. So the information that appears on the state transparency is our audited financial information. Okay.
I'll have one already done. Move on to the
Yes, President White.
Thank you, Mr. Rivers. It's getting punchy.
That's the second question you've been.
Right, and one. All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. All right, so our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure provide for consent agenda listing several items for approved by the board by a single motion. Once the items listed in the consent agenda documentation concerning these items have to be provided to the board members and public in advance to ensure an extensive and thorough review. The item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. Otherwise, site. Motion by Director Parker, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oh, same sign. All right, we'll move on to, well, does anybody need a recess? Move on to our own business, policy amendments to change.
President Wales, this is our third reading around over-the-counter medication. We received just one comment since our last board meeting, and the premise of the comment was essentially how are we communicating and are we being transparent about what we're saying is students can carry only one dose and that it's in its regular packaging. The answer to both those is yes, in the communication that we're planning to send out, and Tabitha has it just about ready to roll. We're waiting for a vote tonight, and if so, we will communicate that communication to you first thing in the morning before we push it out to our nurses and allow them to go broader with it and look at our broader communications. But yes, we will be communicating to our constituents about the shift in policy, including that we still have the drug policy for students that decide to make a bad choice, right? And bring more medicine than they should. But that's the only feedback we've had on this policy since our last reading. Questions you have, or Tabitha, anything you want to share?
Did a wonderful job summing it up.
Touch base on the communication.
Yes, so, I'm working with Amy Gregory. I asked her to create just a quick one-page PDF. So it's short and sweet for parents to highlight the necessary changes to the policy that, students are able to carry. One daily dose needs to be in their original packaging. If families are unable to access, we're asking them to reach out to the school nurse so that we can get them in touch with appropriate community entities that are able to donate, medications and things like that. I also did put in there clear that if the student should violate this policy, it would default to alcohol consent. And that was some of the feedback that we received from the last meeting. It's really 5 bullet points. Short. Yes, my preference would be to send out via email, building admin know that should it be approved, they'll be asked to have this in their newsletter as well, on top of the single email. I asked Amy Gregory to also post that on social media, things like that, once everything's approved, so that way we're getting as many process for communication as possible.
So I don't want to throw a wrench in this, but
Getting your wrench out.
I'm a little concerned about original package. Especially when we're talking about a cough drop or like ibuprofen Tylenol. So if I buy 500 aspirin tablets, do I have to dump out 499 of those into a plastic bag and keep them at home, put the one in the bottle and eating?
So as a parent in the district too, I also buy the 500 bottle of aspirin or Tylenol. My recommendation or suggestion would be to go and just purchase the one little item that you can get for travel size, and then I'm just gonna put them in that, and that's what my student will carry. We just have to have an original packaging, so that way we know what the daily dose is.
So the same holds true with cough drops. A whole bag, empty bag of Ricola with one in it.
One of the things that I'll put in the room is, I think where we are right now allows us to have freedom as a district in how we respond. So while I understand that, we actually had that conversation earlier today. And I think we have leeway to respond through this policy and potentially have a conversation if we find someone that has 3 Advil in a bag. And talk to the family and see if we can help at least inform, but not go beyond that. So I don't feel pigeonholed in how we have to respond, which I think is the important part, right? Is we can tell pretty easily what the Advil is with the Tylenol, so we can make an informed decision in how we respond. We've given a lot of flexibility in this policy, and I think it's pertinent, I think, to say it should be in its original bottle, so we have some idea what it is. But I also think we have flexibility in how we respond.
So you want to even, different prescription medication when it is original care?
Remember, prescription doesn't fit in what we're talking about, because prescription, we still have to, we're just talking about over the counter and this modification.
And if a prescription is in the school, there's health care and board already in place, then there's
Because one of the things I'd say, as we're thinking about whether to approve this tonight or not, is we walked out of last meeting 2 weeks ago. And we gave the expectation to our nurses not to give it out and give out any over the counters anymore and follow our policy, which they're happy with, but they feel protected by doing that. I think this gives us the flexibility to be public about what we're trying to do. And we can monitor what we're seeing. My sense is we're not gonna see that this is a huge problem. I don't think that's what we're gonna see.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm glad that we're adopting a flexible attitude towards it. But the way it's written doesn't provide that flexibility. That's a choice that the administration are making.
Yeah.
And so that's where I get hung up on it, because 5, 6, 7 years from now, we have new administration, new leadership, they may interpret that differently.
So my question to you and the board would be, would you prefer that part was pulled out? Does that put us at more risk than? where we
Right,
are now?
Which paragraph specifically are you referring to?
It's really just about in its original
Number.
container.
Under the sub, title number 1, medication must be an original properly labeled container.
So if you have a child that perhaps has a PRN medication that they take as needed, but it's prescription, where does that fall under this? Like, do I have to, as a parent, notify the school? Is that what, I'm a little bit confused on the wording on that.
So if they have a prescription medication and they're able to self-carry, they have a self-care plan already.
Yeah.
The school is already aware of it and there's a standing order.
But you're asking the parents to make school aware of that?
For a prescription medication,
Yeah.
that's already in policy, that
Okay.
we should be made aware of.
So-
So that's not.
So how is this here where it says prescription medication, student stay, daily medication, dose, et cetera, in the proper labeled container, if that's addressed in a different policy,
So that's not changing in this policy, that
Okay.
remains the same, that's still the same from our current policy.
Okay,
The prescription medication, that, none of that wording has changed. It's only the over-the-counter medication where we're providing flexibility for families to allow their students to self-care.
It really starts down below with the blue students,
right.
and then goes down and it's the student may possess the medication.
I like everything about it except for the original packaging, because, just practicality is if I know my student needs an ibuprofen at noon and we buy the Costco bottle, or sometimes we have sent, some sort of cough medicine that is not a cough drop. So it's an over-the-counter cough medicine. And so I agree with I'm just trying to think practicality is, I know you can get mini packets of Advil and ibuprofen and Tylenol, but I'm kind of thinking, what about if the student needs a Tylenol cold tablet, where those, original packaging may be more tricky? Because I have been guilty of just saying, here, slide this into your pocket and take this at lunchtime. And according to the policy, that we would be out of the protocol. Correct. I agree with that. And I don't want to be that stinker, but, oh, I'm also a rule keeper, and so I know I'll feel guilty if I'm like, just put it in your pocket, because I'll know if we pass it, then it will be against the official policy. So I guess I am a little hung up on the original packaging. I don't want it to be a big deal, but I also don't want it to be not in compliance.
What benefit does it give the school having this? Even if it's
It's just those things in general change.
Don't finish and if it's dropped.
Yeah, if you got it on the floor, you can read it, go Google it, find out what it is exactly, I guess. I guess I'd rather have, I mean, I buy Advil at Costco, you know? And it's expensive, so I just look at this. I don't know. Look up what it is. Probably at the same time. If there's a question, there's a dropped or questions. I mean, there's no fill out where you can't Google. I know.
No, it's true.
So, I don't know.
We've looked at several different board policies from around the Northern region, and I shared them with. But most of their language is either more restrictive than this or false.
I just don't think it's very practical at all. I don't know. I also, I think. Not all, like Monica was saying, not everything comes in a single package. So it does get. So we're also opening the door for kids to get in trouble. For something that shouldn't be a big deal with single parent home. But it's not in its original packaging, I mean, it's.
I mean, that's
I
the
don't
thing,
think
is that
that's
allowing
right.
it, let's say they're failure to be consistent with this policy would be considered a violation. Subject to disciplinary consequences.
What would language that makes sense?
So I mean, that's what I'm sitting here kind of going through my head. I mean, is it, we say something to the effect of medication should preferably be, or should we say in when feasible, should be? Or should? It provides some flexibility.
What you said earlier, though, was practically, this policy was guideline. If there's a student who has a Ziploc baggie with 2 ibuprofen in it, and it falls on the floor, there'll be a conversation with the student, with the family, but nobody's gonna get, sent home.
But Michael's point's well taken, right, is that that's guidance that leadership has to give, right? And so it could be that at some point in time, it's perceived differently. I say that to you as a dad who, my daughter carries 2 Advil in her pocket in a Ziploc baggie. And so I totally understand what we're saying and would love to get to a place where we could put in place the policy and let it run. But what you're all saying makes sense, right? And I think one of the things that sticks in my head is we all sit here talking about we buy in bulk because it's cheaper. And for those that struggle to have dollars, going and buying something separate is gonna be hard, it's a hardship. And yes, what I appreciate about it is Tabitha and the nurses will work to try to help that, but not everyone's gonna ask for it. So, so that's why I'm wondering, if your idea, Nate, to say should, gives us, maybe build in the flexibility. Doesn't remove it completely, but also doesn't tie our hands, which I think is where you're trying to go with it. I mean, I think that's what all of you are trying to say is, we don't wanna put in this situation that ties our hands on the backside of it when we're trying to do something that's more flexible.
And I mean, you might even, I mean, you can even write that a little greater and say medication should be in a properly labeled container, preferably the original product.
Strike must. It should. Realistically, it's happening.
Right now.
And I mean, the communication that we did with CMON was specific to, I put pills in.
Right.
So that's that change. Water policy.
If we go from must to should, I think I will push us to take a vote on it.
I don't think it's a substantive change, right? It's a bonus change that allows us a little more flexibility, but it doesn't change the intent of policy.
And then we can start operating with the policy in place. I say that partly because we've had minimal communication, and now we're on reading number 3. And I know we've got nurses chomping at the bit to know what direction to go and to communicate out. Right now, we're operating without telling anybody. So we want to make a motion to change that, and then
I'm gonna make a motion that we approve policy JLCD with the amendment to
Okay, I have a motion by Vice President Sasano, second by Director Johnson to approve JLCP with the change that item number 1 dropping out must, should. I would say, thank you, everybody. It's a hard time to make the switch in the middle of the year on something like this. And yeah, but really appreciate all looking at other districts. What if anybody else, others are doing,
We appreciate the thoughtful conversation you've always had. That's good for us.
all right, any other discussion comments? Here, no, see you now.
Monica Johnson? Yes. Amanda Proctor? Yes. Nate Fasano?
Yes.
Amy Musgrave? Yes. Michael Wales?
Yes.
That feels really good to find.
Do not see that with dance.
I know, I feel like the cheerleaders need to come back, but I can do a few more.
That comes back to early December, so.
I know.
Throw some people up in there. I can throw it up in there. Let's move on to our next item of old business. This is the appeal of IK8.
President Wales, we've had no feedback on this policy whatsoever. So we'd ask the board to take a vote.
This one on, questions. Concerns? Into 13B.
To accept policy amendment to refill IK8.
IKA. Discussion.
Monica Johnson? Yes. Amanda Proctor? Nate Fasano?
Yes.
Amy Musgrave? Yes. Michael Wales?
Yes. We thought it was over, folks. But it's back. Everest budget 2. The fight continues. Go to our special business, which is our supplemental budget presentation by Mr. Everest.
Thank you, President Wales, members of the Board of Education, and Superintendent Nielsen. Tonight, I'd like to give you an overview for the proposed supplemental budget for the district that will carry us through for the remainder of this fiscal year. Looking at slide 2, general fund revenue overview. This budget has total general fund revenue of $49,476,000. We have $6,319,000 in transfers to the district's charter schools. We have $996,000 transferred to our insurance reserve fund, and we have $1.5 million being transferred into our capital reserve fund, which gives us a net general fund revenue of $40,691,000. Looking at the second page, this is just a recap of the district's funded pupil count for the 23-24 school year. The core district saw an increase of 61 students to 3,263.5. KQA saw a reduction of 3 students to 407 students. Civica saw a reduction from the adopted budget of 56 students to 154 students. Overall, the district saw growth in students, saw growth of 2 students over the adopted budget. Going to the 4th slide, our total program funding for this fiscal year. Our per pupil rate is $10,087.28. Our funded pupil count is 3,824.5, which gives us a total program funding for the year of $38,578,000. And then breaking it down between the 3 different organizations within the district, the core district has total program funding of $32,919,000. Knowledge Quest Academy, $4,105,000, and Civica, $1,553,000. Moving on to slide 5, just discussing the state share versus local share. As we talked about in the work session, the district saw its assessed valuation increase by over 100% from tax year 2023 to tax year 2024. This is causing a massive shift in the proportion of our funding that comes from the state versus the proportion of our funding that comes through local property taxes. If we were to use our current student count numbers, but apply last year's assessed valuation to those numbers, we would have almost 38% of our total program funding come from local share, from our local property taxes, and we would have 62% come from the state. With the increase in assessed valuation for tax year 2024, those percentages more than flip. Where our local share, our local property taxpayers will pay 75% of our total program funding, and the state will pay almost 25% of our total program funding. That's a swing of $14.4 million between what the state is essentially saving in paying our district versus $14.4 million that our local taxpayers will be paying to fund our total program. As we talked about in the prior meeting, this has cash flow implications for both this year and going forward, and district administration will be diligent in how our cash flows will change for the remainder of this year going on into next year. Moving on to slide 6, our projected general fund expenditures are $42,711,000. This is an increase of $1,148,000 over our adopted budget. The principal drivers of the expenditure changes, we had a $491,000 contingency for positions that the district currently has open that we intend to fill for the remainder of this school year, and then also for some new positions that we'll be looking to fill for the remainder of this school year. We have a $350,000 general contingency in the general fund. And as we talked a little bit about during the audit presentation, I've increased our budget for the state on behalf payment for para contribution. It was $500,000. I've increased it to $1.2 million, since that appears to be the level that we'll be having to book that transaction at. So that's a $700,000 increase in our expenditure budget for the state on behalf payment. And then remember, there's a corresponding increase on the revenue side of $700,000. So the net between those two is zero on our bottom line. Moving on to slide 7. This is what our budgeted general fund balance will look like going forward. So our table reserve of $1,238,000 long-term contracts, $220,000. Non-spendable fund balance, $233,000. Board of Education reserved fund balance, $2,710,000. And then that leaves us with an unassigned fund balance of $394,000 for a total general fund balance of $4,797,000. One thing that I would like to point out to the Board of Education reserve fund balance. Last year, the board did vote to essentially spend $150,000 of the board reserve balance on infrastructure improvements to the football field to support the new scoreboard. Those expenditures actually weren't taken out of general fund, they were actually taken out of the building fund. So what I've done is I basically added back the $150,000 to the board's reserve to restore it back to the $2.7 million that it was originally. Moving on to slides. Moving on to slide 8, we'll start to look at our individual funds. Our insurance reserve fund, beginning fund balance of $212,000, budgeted revenues $966,000, budgeted expenditures $1,166,000. This will lead to a $200,000 decrease in fund balance, leaving us with a budgeted fund balance of $12,305. Revenue decreased by $9,600 and expenditures increased $90,000 over our adopted budget. Reason for these changes, district administration will close this fund at the end of this year and roll this into our general fund. The revenue transfer was taken down to get us, closer to kind of a break-even point with our ending fund balance, since we're going to be closing this fund down. And the increase in expenditures is reflected in increasing workers' compensation expenditures that we have. And then our insurance reserve fund does have a $100,000 contingency. Moving on to slide 9, our food service fund. So we are starting this fiscal year with a beginning fund balance of $1,168,000. Total revenues of $2,306,000. Total expenditures $2,602,000. This will lead to a decrease in fund balance of $295,000 with a budgeted ending fund balance for this fund of $872,000. Budgeted revenue increase of $409,000 and a budgeted expenditure increase of $423,000 over our adopted budget for this year. The reason for these pretty significant changes to this fund's budget are based off of projections for the how much our participation in our food service program has been this year. Largely due to the result of the free school meals for all program that the state enacted, and this is its inaugural year. We've seen 35 to 40% increase in our participation. So that will increase our revenue that this fund will take in, and it also will, proportionally increase our expenditures in this fund with the food service contract that we have with Sodexo. We essentially pay per meal, so the more meals that are served, the higher the expense will be for the district, but then also the higher the revenue. So they move in tandem that way. At the end of last fiscal year, the district basically had too much cash in our food service fund. Using the 3-month calculation, over $685,000 surplus, and the newer 6-month calculation, over $203,000. So we need to have a spending plan to bring our fund balance down to an acceptable level for the program.
We have that in place now.
I'm sorry?
We have that in place.
We have, we don't have everything in place. Mrs. Matcha is, we are replacing equipment, that needs to be replaced, with the, renovation of the MNS building. Once the middle school moves to, RMS, we are planning on significant expenditures in that kitchen right now we're talking about making that more of a central kitchen, the district, where we'll have frozen storage, refrigerated storage, and dry storage in that building. And those are all things that we can use this surplus on to create for us. And then this fund has a $300,000 contingency built into it. Moving on to slide 10, grants fund. This fund, the goal of it is to have a $0 beginning fund balance and a $0 ending fund balance. The revenues and your expenditures match. So with this, we currently have $3,321,000 budgeted for revenues and for expenditures out of our grants. This fund has no contingency.
That does not include best grants.
Best grants are in the building fund. So those are the only grants the district has that aren't in our grants fund.
Thank you.
Student activities fund, beginning fund balance, $676,000. Total revenues of $1,525,000. Total expenditure budget, $1,500,000. This fund is budgeted to increase by $25,000. This fund's revenue and expenditure budget has been increased to better match the inflows and outflows of this fund. Our student activities have really grown over the course of the last several years, so this is just to kind of make sure we're keeping up with that. With our student activity funds, they don't have individual budgets, but they have individual balances, and individual clubs or sports can't overspend. So that's kind of a self-correcting mechanism for that. I'm estimating a $25,000 interest generated from this fund's idle. And this fund also does not have a contingency. Bond redemption fund, beginning fund balance, $16.7 million. Total revenues, $12,425,000. Total expenditure budget, $10,157,000. This fund is projected to increase its fund balance by $2.2 million for an ending fund balance of $18,977,000. This fund's budget is actually really easy to do because it's dictated to by our payment schedule for the general obligation borrowings the district has done for its building programs. Revenue budget has been increased to reflect higher interest revenue received on this fund's idle cash that we received. This fund has a $500,000 contingency. Then our building fund, beginning fund balance, $36.1 million. Revenues, $26.5 million. Expenditures, $44,995,000. We're budgeting for a fund balance decrease of $18,469,000, which will leave us with $17,642. Budgeted revenue for fund is from best program grant revenue and interest earned on cash holdings. Budgeted expenditures are based on information provided by district owner's representative. This fund has a $5 million contingency. Our capital reserve fund, beginning fund balance, $3,383,000. Total revenue budget, $2,270,000. Total expenditure budget, $3,358,000. This is a projected decrease in fund balance of $1,088,000, which will leave us with a total ending fund balance of $2,294,000. Of that amount, we are projecting, our general capital reserve ending fund balance of $1,467,000 and our cash in lieu ending fund balance of $827,000. This fund had to have a major changes done to it, primarily because in the adopted budget, the assumption was that the district's purchase of water rights for RHS and Elwell would have happened in the 22-23 fiscal year. That didn't happen. It happened at the beginning of this fiscal year. So the supplemental budget reworks all of that in. So expenditure budget increased by $2,045,000. And the 1/2 water rights purchase of just over $1 million from capital reserve is a large part of that increase. We're also doing an increase in budget for capital needs to district schools and our transportation department. We have we also increased the contingency in this fund by $200,000. Our revenue budget increased by $1,113,000. This is primarily driven by larger cash in lieu payments that the district is receiving than originally budgeted, and also an increase in transfer from general fund to support capital needs of schools and transportation department. Capital reserve fund has a $400,000 contingency.
Question on that?
Yeah.
When do we pay out the rest of the water jobs?
When do we?
Yeah, because that is the first half of payment of water, the second half of payment of water.
Yes, that's going to be in April. And then this concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions the board may have.
My question, just a comment, I'm glad to see that we've increased the amount going into the capital reserve fund. So where I don't want any of the buildings that we've just got in the building that are about to finish with, turn into leverage.
Yes,
So that's good. Thank you.
I also didn't have a chance when we were upstairs. Michael talked a little bit about the heat pumps out at Pioneer Ridge, and I think his plan to fix the ones that go down will get us in a position where we're not buying all of them at the same time, so they're not all in the same, or their life cycle is not all starting at the same time. And you know, who knows? We may have half of them that last 5-8 years. So the idea of getting life out of the ones we have is, the plan he's put together is a good one. We just have a chance to dig in up there to that, but I really appreciate his thinking there.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's a great example of what I'm talking about,
Yep.
that those heat pumps sat there for years, and whenever we had money to do that, we wouldn't be in a position in that building. So trying to avoid that by putting a little more money inside is good. So thank you.
I just have one question. With the cash in lieu, once a community passes cash in lieu, is that immediately, does it happen in the next fiscal year, or how does that?
It would largely depend on, you know, the specifics of how they pass it. Most, like when Johnstown passed theirs, I mean, it took effect essentially immediately, and that's kind of been my experience with it. I mean, it's possible that they could delay it, you know, if they wanted to. It's just however the towns want to implement it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Interesting enough, when we were reading it, the conversation there was about the big neighborhood that's going in and where were they in planning? And had they started actually pulling permits on the houses, which might have locked it into the cheaper one, but they haven't. So that's how I've heard that message over there. So
I think that a municipality can say we're going to start the agreement on a certain date. Really puts the money in our account. So that might, they might put it in place today, but
For 6 years, right?
On the capital reserve fund, I believe we have the capital reserve fund sitting in a college trust account, is that correct?
That's where the majority of the cash is.
So that interest income, this college trust is that like, right now, that interest income, are we able? I know it's lumped in here under revenue, are we able to get that interest income offset to set aside for key accounts or X thing, because we're in a good cycle right now, it's gonna start paying right now in the next calendar year, this calendar.
I mean, essentially, that's what's happening with the interest income, the interest income just becomes a part of the total revenue that the fund receives. And so then that gives us more resources, to be able to to dedicate to things like, heat pump replacement, things like that. So, I mean, it does, I mean, it definitely helps, with that project.
I have questions on the food service fund, but I don't want to do it here. It's obvious that that funds being well managed, but there are still a lot of questions about how that works, especially. I have talked to sometimes soon, getting a work session around food service and the food service fund. So just.
I'll be there.
Yeah. We're booked up, so. I know, that's fine, no, we're struggling to find time, we might have to do some work sessions.
And President Wells, there are 2 resolutions I'd like the board to consider. That would probably be better.
I'll motion to agree. Make sure the chart.
Yes. Yep, they're rolled into the resolution.
Any other questions? Comments, discussion?
Amanda Proctor, Steve Fasano,
Yes.
Amy Musgrave, Michael Gibbs. Make a motion to accept resolution from, the resolution of the Board of Ed for the, to accept supplemental budget. I'll make a motion to accept the resolution for portion of the beginning fund balance authorized by Colorado statutes.
Authorizing the use of a portion of the income balance.
Johnson. Yes. Andy Proctor. Nate Fasano.
Yes.
Amy Musgrave. Yes. Michael Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Evers.
Thank you.
We don't have any citizen topics. Any other items deemed necessary by the board, and I'm supposed to tell you guys do not leave.
We had a question about our. Appreciate the next meeting, update on construction. If I heard some of but I would also like to know, let's keep on the next varsity.
Yep.
So you can try to find a slot.
That's good. Yep.
One very quick town meeting, probably during. Anyone, it's their decision now. I don't know what the outcome will be, but that's my recommendation for staff.
I think one of the channel opportunities we may have is they may be asking for land. As it's proposed right now, they're looking at a two-lane roundabout both ways with a third lane to turn into Roosevelt, on Roosevelt Drive. So from my perspective, it's a great option. It's a better option for students than the light would be there. And it's gonna be wide, when they think about it. They're gonna use it as a single lane for a while, but they're anticipating Colorado eventually will be a two-lane both-way road. So that, and I think they initially talked about it the group last night.
The town meeting is tonight, I don't know if it's a
Okay, okay.
I know it's on their agenda tonight.
Maybe this morning I'm just mistaken.
I did read in their packet that a light would actually take up more land in the roundabout, which was surprising to me, but I just wanted to forward you that may be coming. So we'll see what it is.
How long is that construction actually school?
There were no dates on the packet that I saw, there were no dates, so I assume maybe it's just move forward, then appropriate the money and possibly bids also. So it'll be a while, I'm sure. It is on there, and
And it is a nuisance when they put in around they make Colorado a mess. And so that'll be hard. And when it's done, it will be good. Kids here, and hopefully we'll decide to do much of it over the summer. They've been real good. Matt has been good, and Jason's been good about working with the district around trying to figure out how to close it. So I suspect that that'll be between then. And that's a big project.
it would be. I just wanted to know where on their document. So that's it.
Other things I want to share, the jackets for each of you are from Roosevelt High School. Chad has worked for a while to try to get these made for each of you, and so if you have a chance to thank Chad, Dave, I think it's nice of them to think of you all as Roosevelt Rough Riders, and now you've got a Roosevelt Rough Rider American flag jacket for the cold days. Not the last couple of folks. It's the ones that are coming. So,
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Surprise. Any other comments, questions, or items deemed necessary by the